is happening, everyone? Thank you again for joining us at another Adventure Box podcast. This is Zach Edwards coming to you live, at least live when I write this or record this. Of course, it's not live. We actually can edit, though we don't really find reasons to edit because we let you see all the flaws. Now, that being said, welcome to Adventure Box podcast. This is put together by Historical Conquest. Historical Conquest is a really fun game where you can actually learn just by having fun. And you don't have to learn if you don't want to, but just by playing the game, you're going to learn who people from history are. Think of it like a Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic, but with the gameplay of Risk, but where every card that you're playing with is an actual person from history, or event, or technology, or such. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the colonies. So this is colonial life. This is Monday. We're going to be talking about the Dutch. Now, wait a second. The Dutch. I thought it was the French, the Spanish, the English, and the Portuguese. Oh, no. There's three that not many people talk about, and they need to. Because the Dutch, without the Dutch, you wouldn't really have New York. Well, you could probably have New York afterwards, but they're the ones that started New York. As New Amsterdam. Or the Swedish, who came in and had another large influence down lower in the Delaware River. Or how about the Russians? Yeah, did you know that the Russians settled America? Yeah, so we're going to go over that as well. Now, the Russian settling will be actually later on in history, but we're going to do it today because these are like the three unknown countries that settled the Americas. And they didn't do it all at the same time, but they're the ones that not as many people talk about. So here we go. Let's talk about some of the most important parts. Okay, so let's go into the map. So I want to go call up backpack. Okay, it's not Outdoor Explorer. We're doing Adventure Box Podcast. Okay, so here we have a map of the Delaware area, Maryland, up into New York. Why do I show you this map? Well, this is about the place where the Dutch explore. Yeah. So let me bring up a person that's very important. We've already talked about him last month. This is Henry Hudson. Now, if you remember Henry Hudson, his adventures brought him to the New World, where the first time he goes around the East Coast and explores this area, the Hudson River. Yeah, look at that, New York, Hudson River, named after Henry Hudson. He's the one that founded it. But then what happened? Well, if you remember the sad experience that he went through, so he came down and explored. Here's the Hudson River. Sorry, the Henry Hudson River, the Hudson River, and down here near the Delaware River and such. But then he went back to England and to the Dutch to tell them what he found. So then he came back again, and this time with the English. And he came as far as Hudson Bay. Oh, look at that. Hudson. Henry Hudson, Hudson Bay. There you go. You never have to forget it if you just know those things. But in 1611, he was caught. Well, 1610 to 1611, he was caught off guard. And the winter rolled in too fast, and he couldn't get back. As you might know, if you know Hudson Bay and Hudson Straits, this all freezes over, or close to freezing over, when the winter comes in. So they were hit by the winter and they could not get out. So they settled in this area with a makeshift camp just to keep everyone alive. They kept most people alive. Then they boarded the ship, headed back, and what happened on the way back? There was a mutiny. And his people, his crew, even though they had tried earlier, and as the person that instigated it was forgiven, he instigated another mutiny, and this time Henry Hudson was basically set off with his son and also the carpenter, I think it was the carpenter, and a few other people set adrift and said, "Goodbye, hope you survive or not, we don't care." And they didn't, because they went back to England and Henry Hudson disappeared. Okay, so that's the story of Henry Hudson. Again, that was around 1610 to 1611. So it's a little bit after the English and such. But also what's important to know is that there was the Dutch East India Company. So the Dutch East India Company was established back in 1602 to explore a way to Asia for trade in Asia. They wanted to charter a monopolized company, which was the Dutch East India Company. There was no other company there, to be able to go to Asia and settle there. Well, that's why Henry Hudson went back over and traveled around the Northwest Passage for the Dutch East India Company, and did not return. So that was 1609, 1610, and 1609 was when I think they hired him, and he sailed. So it must have been 1610. Go back in your curriculum; it's there, exact dates. But the dates are not as important as understanding the story. So what happened next? The Dutch merchants, with Henry Hudson's maps, came back over and created New Netherland Company. So these were merchants, these were traders that monopolized on exploring what was explored by Henry Hudson. So these merchants settled this area and set up some things in this area. So the first one, let's go to the first one. What is the first one? The first one is this one. It is Fort Nassau. So Fort Nassau, let me get you a map that you can actually see where it's from. So Fort Nassau was down here in the Delaware River. This is actually where they settled and started trapping and trading and such. Okay, I'm going to go back. Okay, so this is Fort Nassau. As you can see, during the time of settlement, it was all wood. Later on is when they added stone and concrete to it. So brick, stone, yeah, and pile them up on top of each other to make a fort that was more secure. Because this area was later on to be not invaded, joined by Switzerland, or Sweden. Two totally different countries. Sweden. But we're going to get to that on Thursday. But so we went from Fort Nassau to then they started up. Which one's this one? This one is Fort Christina. So Fort Orange. Christina, Sweden. Fort Orange, as you can see, also surrounded by walls of wood and dirt. But interesting enough, this same design was then replaced by concrete and stone. This was the first settlement by it. And this is one of the images that, if you see our YouTube channel, you'll see the images that they actually used, or that they use right now in different museums for Fort Orange. This is another look at it. Fort Orange was up on the top of a hill overlooking, basically like a peninsula, overlooking the waters in order to shoot cannons at whoever might come and try to attack their settlement. The settlement was actually behind it. Okay, so this is Fort Nassau. And during a time of attack, the idea was that people would actually go into the fort and leave everything. If somebody was coming, the Spanish were coming, the English were coming, the Swedish were coming, anybody was coming, they left everything and they ran. And they took off straight for the fort to be saved in the fort, but also the men to attack on from the fort. And so that's why the forts were so important to this area, because they basically kept everyone safe and kept all the artilleries. So also, if someone came to attack by land, they had to go through the settlement to get to the fort. And by that point, the hope is that they would actually be secure in the fort. So if you're attacking by land, they could see you by water. If they attack by water, they can see you by water. So way off in the distance, because they always have watchmen. But if you come by land, they can see you as you try to come through the settlements. And some people might die. If you come in to kill people, like the Native Americans or the Swedish or whoever, then they'd have to go through the settlement while everyone's running to the fort to secure it and then to attack back. So this was a place that was well established, purposely placed. So, but as we move forward, we're going to go actually into where New Sweden and the Netherlands come together. But before we get to that point, let's go a little bit more over the timeline. Okay, so 1614 is when Nassau was set up. Then, all of a sudden, 1421 is when the Dutch West India Company is established. So no longer a monopoly. The East India Company does not have a monopoly anymore for the Dutch. Now the West Company comes, and there is a fight over things. But there's enough of a separation that while the East India Company has New Fort Nassau, the West Company creates Fort Orange. But with that, they've also going to come out and create what's called New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam later on would be on the southern tip of Manhattan Island. Do you know what that is? Yeah, that's right. It's New York. It's what will become New York, but not yet. Not yet. Okay, so before we get to New Amsterdam, in 1630, the Dutch decide, hey, you know what? We're going to go down into Brazil. And we're not just going to go down into Brazil. We're going to attack the Portuguese and try to take over their places. So they actually stay there for a fairly long time. They actually become there's Newfoundland here, but there's also a settlement down south as well as they attack the Dutch. Because what's happening in Portugal? Sugar. So not Portugal. From the Portuguese in Brazil. What's happening there is they have a lot of different plantations, especially sugar, which is basically the same price as gold. So of course they want to keep that safe. They want to keep that away from everyone else. So, okay, that being said, let's go to Newfoundland and New Amsterdam. Okay, so in this point, we have, see, I'm looking at my notes. When was New Amsterdam actually started? Okay, 1625. I was just about to get to that. 1625, New Amsterdam is settled. So, and I went a little bit ahead. I went to 1630 when they attacked the Dutch. 1625 is when they set up New Amsterdam in what would become New York. Now, everything's going great in New Amsterdam. Let me find you a picture. So, New Amsterdam is a thriving economy. This is New Amsterdam. This one, New Amsterdam. Okay, so New Amsterdam is a thriving economy. This is how it looks when it first starts out, but it grows so fast. Okay, so I told you, 1625 is when they found New Amsterdam, settled it, started it. Okay, so, oops, pictures aren't working. There we go. By 1672, it's a thriving economy. Now, it's in the southern end of Manhattan Island, so there's a good amount of space to grow. But watch this. This one, here's the map. This is actually 1660. For some reason, I thought it was right afterwards. Okay, so this is a better illustration of what New Amsterdam is. And look, there's the fort. They all have the same kind of look to them. Basically, a square with 4 diamonds in each, 1 diamond in each corner. You know why that is? It's because when you have an established area, and you're shooting a cannonball straight at it, yeah, it might be able to go straight in, but if it hits at an angle, and you can see this if you go to Liberty Island in New York, the diamond around the Statue of Liberty was a fort that was based on the idea that all the walls are basically set up so they're at angles. And so if you shoot, you might hit one wall straight on, but the other walls you won't. And so you're going to be bouncing off cannonballs off the walls the best possible. I mean, that's the chances are that you'd be able to do something like that. But it also, the inner square is where everyone is housed. So if you're being attacked, they're going to be trying to attack the corners where the cannons are instead of the interior where the people are. And you're able to man it a lot easier as well. So you have the fort right in the middle, and then you have all the houses. Look at that. It's the same principle as we saw with Fort Nassau. So with this one, you have the fort at the very end. If something happens, someone attacks by land, everyone runs for the fort to establish themselves inside the fort. Now, this is before these buildings start becoming bigger and there's a lot more people, because the fort can only house a certain amount of people. But the opposite happens if you're coming from water, from the ocean. You come in and they're going to be able to see you. So they're going to be able to see that you're coming from the ocean from like miles away, because they have watchmen now. And by that point, those that are in the settlement that want to come to the fort, they can come into the fort. If they want to get away from the fort because they know that's going to be attacked first, they can get away from the fort. So that's one of the reasons for these forts, how they're designed, how they're placed. Everything was specific. They were so smart on what? Remember when we were talking about civilizations? The number one thing of all advancements at this point, well, okay, a little bit before, because now they got into entertaining and things like that. But survival in ancient civilizations was always number one. So all technological advances were all based on survival. Okay, and that's the same thing here. When they're in a new land, you don't know if you're going to survive. You are living here because you hope you're going to survive, because it's a great experience. It's a great opportunity. If someone attacks, it's not a very good opportunity then, but you know it. So this is New Amsterdam. This would soon, later on, become New York. But let me go through a little bit more of the timeline so you can see what it is. Okay, so at this point, a lot of the Dutch actually go down into South America, to Brazil, to try to take over some of the plantations that are already established by the Portuguese, possibly also the Spanish. So everyone's turning on the Spanish and the Portuguese because they know they are well established in these lands. Okay, so you have new governors coming into this land. They're working with or defending against the Native Americans. They faced major conflicts between 1639 and 1647. And so, let's see, they had a major war called the Kieft War. So Dutch settlers under Director William Kieft, I don't know, Kieft, Kieft, had a conflict with the Lenape tribe in New Netherlands, leading to the loss of lives on both sides, and the war weakened the relationship between the indigenous people during this time. But before that, they actually had fairly good relationships, between the Dutch and the indigenous people, the Native Americans. Okay, so 1652, and this is very important, 1652, remember that, 1652, First Anglo-Dutch War. So tensions between the English and the Dutch were happening. And this was mostly happening because of the New World. So conflict, there was impacting trade. New Netherlands was already a little bit weakened because of the war that they had a few years before. So at this point, they're weakened. The Dutch are. They're spending a lot of money in this area. They're trying to get things going in this area. But everything is basically goes back to normal at this point. They don't lose New Amsterdam yet. So what happens? 1664, the English attack again. And now they come. So it's 10 years later, 12 to 10 years later. The English come back seeking to expand their holdings in the New World. So they have not been able to take over New Amsterdam. But because New Amsterdam was having financial issues stemming back into Europe, the Dutch could not defend New Netherlands. And so when the English came in, it was basically the Dutch saying, hey, we have no strife with you. We don't want to fight you. Come on in. And so they literally ceded it without a fire shot. And so it went from New Amsterdam, because of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, to what? All of a sudden it became basically New York, after the Duke of York, future King James II of England. So there you go. That's why it became New York. But it doesn't stop there. It does not stop there, because during the Third Anglo-Dutch War, so when they captured it, it was the Second Dutch Anglo War. The Third Dutch Anglo War, the Dutch actually take back New York and then rename it New Orange. New Orange? Are you serious? Who was it called New Orange? Was it orange? No, it doesn't look orange. Why in the world would you call it orange? I have no clue. I have no clue. However, when they signed the treaty to bring peace between the Anglos or English and the Dutch, they actually returned it back to England. They basically said, "We don't have the money to provide for this, so go ahead, take it. We don't care. No longer our concern." And they took it. And actually, at that point, it actually became more successful in New Amsterdam. That became New York. That became New Orange, and then went back to New York. Thank you for calling it New York. Okay, so that being said, that's what happened with the Dutch in this area. So very important to understand that thanks to Henry Hudson, well, I should say, thanks to the Dutch East India Company hiring Henry Hudson to explore this land, thanks to those that settled Fort Nassau as the first, and then those that came in with the Dutch West India Company and settled New Netherlands, which would become the area of New Amsterdam, setting up Fort Orange, which we talked about, setting up all these other forts. I mean, there was actually a good amount of forts, so I'll explain a few of them. Of course, there was Fort, what was the first one I said? Fort Orange. Well, yeah, Fort Orange, because Fort Nassau was East India Company. West was Fort Orange. Then there was a settlement on Governor's Island. Then there was New Amsterdam. Then there's one that I don't really know how to say this, but I'll try to pronounce it. Ren Sel Auerswick. Arswick. Remsel-Auerswick. Now that was me totally butchering because I'm not going to do it now. But it was the patron was Kilian von Rezalior. Sure. So he had the patronage over this, which was around Fort Orange. Okay. And Fort Orange is different than New Orange. Again, I don't know why in the world would they call it that. Okay. Then there was Fort Amsterdam, which you can see is inside Amsterdam, New Amsterdam. Then you have Fort Hughes de Guadeloupe, which is in Connecticut. Then you have Pavonia, which is in New Jersey, Jersey City, New Jersey. Then you have Brooklyn. I mean, what kind of name is Brooklyn? Oh, wait a second. Brooklyn. Oh, another part of New York. Okay. Yes, there was Brooklyn. Then there was the Vrysendal, which was Edgewater, New Jersey. And then it continues. There's still more. New Harlem, which then became Harlem. Look at that. Hey, that worked out. Okay, then the Dutch captured New Sweden. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to tell you about that. But that's not supposed to happen right yet. I'm not supposed to tell you that until we talk about Sweden. So I'm going to end it here. And we're going to go to Thursday, where we're going to be talking about New Sweden, which is in the New World, which is in the Americas, which is a lot more than just what I can tell you in one day. So this is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing in the last few weeks. This is what we're going to continue to do for the next 2 years, because there's so much information. We're going to go through everything from the French and Indian War, the American Revolution, the construction, the birth of a new nation. I mean, everything from the slavery, Native Americans, and religion all the same month, because those are three major ones. We're going to talk about the Civil War. We're going to talk about everything from the Roaring Twenties, the World War I, Roaring Twenties, World War II. We have not gotten to World War III. Hopefully we don't get there. So join us on Thursday for more on New Sweden. If you want to come back tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Egypt. And this is what I really like talking about, because Egypt is so fascinating to me, especially right now, because we're actually talking about the Hyksos during the Second Intermediate period. Now, does that really make any sense? Okay, let me make it make sense. Hebrews in Egypt during the start of the migration into Egypt. That's right. We talked about that a little bit last week. We're going to go more into it this week and what happened, because I just figured out something mind-blowing, totally mind-blowing. We're going to be going after that tomorrow when it comes to what happened to those that were the Hyksos or the Canaanites. Those are historically completely accurate. Hyksos, Canaanites, all the same people. The Hebrews in that area. Okay, so with that, I'm going to let you go. Stay tuned for more. Can't wait to tell you. Can't wait to tell you. It's just going to be great. But we'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.